Judges Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and gatheringmagic.com. Support our show by visiting both websites. Now it's time for Judges Corner with David Green.
Hi, my name is David Green. I'm a Level 2 judge from Orlando, Florida, and welcome to our first episode. In these episodes, we're going to be covering different rules interactions and how they affect you as a player from a judge's perspective. So one of the first rules I'd like to cover today is Trample. Trample means if this creature would assign enough damage to its blockers to destroy them, you may have it assign the rest of its damage to the defending player or planeswalker. So what that means is, whenever a creature with Trample would attack, say for example an Armada Worm, and it's blocked by your opponent's 1/1 Goblin tokens, say 3 of them, you can assign 1 damage to each of the tokens, and then that excess 2 damage can be assigned directly to the player's life total or to their planeswalker's loyalty total. So the reason why we're bringing this to your attention today is because Trample can be very confusing for newer players and older players alike. It has a lot of confusing interactions with both keyworded abilities and rules of the game that are both common and uncommon. So the first thing we're going to take a look at today is when a creature is removed before it actually deals damage when being attacked by a Trample creature. Say when your Duskdale Worm attacks and is blocked by Concordia Pegasus. But let's say that Concordia Pegasus is murdered before we ever get to deal damage. How much damage are you getting to assign with your 7/7 attacker? Well, normally because it's blocked, you're not going to get to assign any damage, but because we're dealing with Trample, Trample says that when I have excess damage, I can assign any excess damage to the player or the planeswalker that I'm attacking. So in this case, you can assign all 7. In fact, you have to assign all 7 damage to that player or planeswalker. How about if a creature with protection blocks our Trampler? In the next example, we have our Riders of Gavony blocking our Duskdale Worm, who selected Worm as the creature type. In that case, you'll get to assign at least lethal or more than lethal to the defending creature and the remainder to the player or planeswalker. So the minimum that you could deal to a player or planeswalker would be 0, and then you'd assign all 7 to the creature, in which case it would be prevented, and the maximum you could assign would be 4, and then 3 would be prevented to the Riders. So what happens if your Duskdale Worm gets blocked by a creature with indestructibility? For example, Avacyn. And let's say that Avacyn was already dealt lethal damage, perhaps 9 damage by Bonfire of the Damned earlier in the turn. So when you attack and they block, you have more control over how much damage is going to get dealt in this scenario. For example, you can deal all 7 to Avacyn, or all 7 to the player or planeswalker, or you could break it up however you want. Because Avacyn was already dealt lethal damage earlier in the turn, so you have the option of assigning the excess damage to Avacyn, or a certain amount of damage to Avacyn, and the remainder, which could be all or nothing, or even a portion of that damage, to the player or planeswalker. So let's take a look at the next example. In this example, you've decided to play Deadly Allure in your Duskdale Worm. So now you have to block my creatures, and my creature has Death Touch with Trample. How does that work? Well, let's say when I attack, your opponent then has to block with their 2 Centaur tokens. But since you've played Deadly Allure, your creature has Death Touch and Trample. Because of that, you only have to assign 1 damage to each of those Centaur tokens for it to be considered lethal. And from there, you can assign the remainder 5 damage over to the player's life total or to their planeswalker's loyalty total. Of course, you can always assign more than lethal to the defending creatures, but why would you want to? So let's change it up. Let's put Avacyn in their place, and you're still attacking with the same Duskdale Worm, with the same Deadly Allure already on it. In this example, Avacyn, which has indestructibility, decides to block the Duskdale Worm, and you only have to deal 1 point of damage for it to be considered lethal. So in this case, you can deal 1 to Avacyn and 6 to the defending player or planeswalker. You could also deal 5 to Avacyn and 2 to the defending player or planeswalker, or all 7 to Avacyn. It's really your choice. But as long as you're dealing 1 which is considered lethal, the remainder can be assigned to the player or planeswalker. So let's take a look at our last example. In this example, we're going to be giving our Corrosive Monitor Double Strike with Cleavered Riot. And then when we attack, our opponent's going to block with Restoration Angel. So because of Double Strike, we'll be assigning damage in the first damage step and the normal damage step. In the first damage step, we're going to be assigning 3 damage to the Restoration Angel, and then when we get down to the normal damage step, we'll only need to assign 1 for it to be considered lethal, and the remaining 2 can be assigned to the defending player or planeswalker. So this concludes our first episode. Hopefully by now you have a better understanding of how Trample works both independently and in conjunction with other keyworded abilities. Stay tuned next week where we're going to take a closer look at protection, and until then, shuffle thoroughly, play at a reasonable pace, and have fun.